3/4 of India's billion-plus population still live in villages. But that's changing. Every year, 2 million people leave the countryside for the towns. Most end up in slums. In this week's program, we find out the reasons for the exodus and speak to those who think it's a sellout to the Western model of development.
बीस साल से रहता है, ऐसा बिगाड़ी काम करता है, कभी लगता है कभी नहीं है, अभी ऐसा घर पे रहता है, क्या करेगा, नहीं लगेगा तो घर पे रहता है।
अगर बकरी बिक्री रहेगा ना, उससे कमाई, बकरी बैल खेती बाड़ी में लगता है ना।
और मोटर गाड़ी का डर है, 4-5-6 बच्चा लोग है, जाता है गजरा बेचने को जाता है, वो जाता है, वो क्या होएगा क्या नहीं, वो तो है ना डर।
Received wisdom says people quit the countryside for the bright lights and a chance of newfound wealth, a pattern of development seen in all the so-called rich countries. And India appears to be following suit, except that even in booming cities like Bangalore and Mumbai, conditions can be appalling for the new arrivals. No sanitation, no living space, and few jobs. The contrast is especially stark for the Adivasis, tribal peoples who have lived outside the caste system. Some still make a living from India's dwindling forests.
यह छोड़ के जा नहीं सकेंगे, अगर ये जगह छोड़ के कहीं बाहर जाओ तो मुश्किल लगते हमला साल भर महीना भर बीतना, काहे हमार मन के आदत जंगले में है। अब वो तो हमन सोचा था कि जंगल के रहने वाले अच्छा रहते हैं, स्वास्थ्य जंगल के पेड़ पौधा के अच्छा हवा मिलता है।
सुगत पड़ता है, मतलब कमजोर, मतलब पैसा कौड़ी से लेने से वही प्रकार के हम लोग मजा नहीं आता साहब। वहाँ शहर एरिया में वहाँ समझो तो लकड़ी भी खरीदना, चावल भी खरीदना आए और पानी भी खरीदना, ये सब वहाँ होगा तब वो काम बनेगा साहब। अब यहाँ हम लोग हैं तो ऐसे थोड़ा थोड़ा सब चीज़ में हम लोग को कम जो मतलब कम पड़ जाता है, इसी पास के थोड़ा मज़ा नहीं आता है साहब। अब हम लोग अभी हम बहुत दिन के बसे हुए आदमी हैं तो थोड़ा से मज़ा नहीं आता होता है।
People who make a living from the forest have historic rights to their home. But when we went to the jungles of Orissa and Chhattisgarh, the tribal peoples told us that despite their avowed forest-friendly traditions, it appears the Indian authorities would prefer to see them moved.
पहली 2-3 साल पहले भगाए के प्लान रहे से कि सब गांव ला हटाया जाए,
कुछ कर सकता नहीं हम लोग, वही बात है साहब। अब
Without formal written legal title to their land, tribal people say they can't make even basic improvements like digging small ponds to supply water through a drought.
नींद वो कोड़ वो अब ऐसे ना मतलब होता है, अब कमा था और पूरा तो पूर्त है, अब नहीं रहा तो कहाँ जाएं, भूखे भी रह जाथन।
But the authorities have a different view. They feel their job, in a nation where wild areas are fast disappearing, is to safeguard biodiversity and boost timber production.
If they come out of the like scattered village into one mainstream, that will be better for their future. And for forest also, if the conflict is reduced, naturally the habitat will improve and the wildlife will also improve.
Indian courts are famous for moving at a snail's pace, but some say the courts delay issuing land rights documents proving farmers have been cultivating this land for generations. With no proof of ownership, the villagers take any work that's going.
अब निकल जाता साहब बाहर, वैसे कमाए खा लब गए, अब बुजुर्ग बसर हो नहीं हमारे यहाँ बमनी गाँव में, निकल गए इलाहाबाद हम लोग कमाने खाने के लिए। अब 6 महीने तक वहाँ गुजर करा साहब हम लोग, 6 बजे फिर आ गया, फिर हम लोग ठीक बहा नहीं रही से वो काम बस में आवे, वो एकदम लेबर से बहुत बातचीत करे, वो थोड़ा भग जा फिर आवे, पीछे फिर लगे रहे साहब वो काम हमारा।
अब का करिए, वही गे रहे हैं रैली में, उन्हें लगे वैसे भाषण गोठिया जी भी बताए हैं, वही चर्चा होत रही से वहाँ। एक तो पार्षद वाले के कि 5 एकड़ जमीन दो एक किसान ला।
Ekta Parishad means Solidarity Forum in Hindi. It was established by urban intellectuals concerned over the fate of Adivasis who have no way of standing up to the authorities and the courts.
My name is Rajgopal. I am the national convener of Ekta Parishad. Ekta Parishad is a mass-based organization working in about 8 states of India. And the basic idea is to bring back Gandhian philosophy into action. That is what we are trying to do. In a fast globalizing world where abusive capitalism has become the order of the day, we are trying to remind policy makers and planners that there is yet another way to go about.
हाँ, इसे एकता परिषद वाले बहुत जगह में इसे भैया मन ला जमीन दे हैं, बाकी वो मन सब बसे हैं खेती करत हैं.
Ekta Parishad is a homegrown forum that has its counterparts elsewhere in the world. In Mumbai, more than 200,000 people attend the World Social Forum, a biannual event that brings together prominent international activists committed to their vision of a fairer world. In general, they are opposed to development philosophies that they say benefit big business at the expense of the poor and a fragile planet.
More and more people who go to urban areas are becoming slaves in the global economic and political establishment.
Today, we have to say, transnational, quit India, Coca-Cola.
What is happening is that we are privileging the material side of human beings. We are much more than our economic selves. We are people with spirit, we are people with creativity, and we need to in fact celebrate that humanity.
I think all the Western aid that is coming into India should help support sustainable agricultural practices so that people stay in their villages and are resourceful and feel empowered also.
But instead of empowering tribal people, critics say government policy increasingly excludes them from the very forests that sustain them for centuries.
कावर काठी जहाँ ले रुंधा जाही थी वो तो कहाँ च काठी अरे भाई वो तो रुंधे ला कोशिश करते सरकार हन जगह अब नपवा के तब कहाँ काठी मर तो जा बोता अब सही है जंगल में बिगड़ गुंजे तो हमारा निस्तार नहीं कटे छीर बगई करथन पान पत्ता टोरथन का है साहब यहाँ 4 बोरा कई आदमी पाथे 10 बोरा धान.
In every village you will see something very similar what you see here in this village. People have cleared some forests because they want to cultivate. Old days are gone where they had the freedom to go into the forest and take what they want to take. Now when you restrict people from entering into forest, what you are basically saying, okay, forest is no more yours, get to agriculture. So they say, okay, where is the land for agriculture? In order to avoid confrontation, what people need should be decided. And that is where the government should come down to every village, sit with them and see what is the population, how much acres of land the village need, and give it out to them and tell the forest department that you protect the rest of it.
The issue of land distribution is highly contentious. Villagers who take their produce to market argue that family plots as small as 2 hectares are viable. But the authorities are not convinced. With a fast-growing nation to feed, they see consolidation as the only policy.
An optimum size of an agricultural holding for a farmer would be 50 acres. Smaller fragmented size holdings will not be able to sustain a farmer.
Right? This industrialization of land and agriculture is the most stupid way one can go about. So what I think is, if you want to give 5 acres of land to people, this is possible in this country. And 5 acre of land I am suggesting, that is the kind of level of holding which a family can handle.
If you change the schedule from forest to agriculture, then probably that land could be made available to people who can afford to have farms. There is a company called Cargill, which I understand is number 11 in the Fortune 500 companies. It is an American company. It is the number 1 in the food sector. the agriculture sector. They are setting up an edible oil refinery in Paradeep. The company should be going into production very, very soon.
Someone who begins with 40 acres of land finally ends up with 3,000 acres, 4,000 acres of land in the name of plantation, in the name of mining, in the name of tomato cultivation, in the name of anything. And here you have no control what kind of a pesticides they are going to use, what kind of a crop they are going to take. In 10 years they will mess up the land and give it back and run away.
Vision 2020 is India's development plan for catching up with the West. Part funded by the British government, it aims to help modernize India.
See, the Vision 2020 being funded by the government of UK through DFID is looking at it from a holistic point of view. They are providing infrastructure with regard roads and other communication facilities.
One argument increasingly that you hear in this era of economic globalization is that it is important for all of us to become a partner in this process of globalizing ourselves, because we live in an extremely competitive economic environment, and if India can become, as it indeed its economic planners and its politicians want us to become, another superpower. We have forcibly displaced 40 million people in the name of development. We continue to displace about 1 million people every year in the name of economic development. And international aid and international processes of economic globalization, the kind of trade regimes that are the kind of trade systems that are being imposed on us, or of which our politicians, many of our politicians want to become a part, are perpetuating displacement.
In the drive for development, there are always winners and losers, and the victims pay a heavy price.
आज को आम धुसुड़ा रेज प्रोजेक्ट बांधा पाई सरकार आज को 20-25 वर्ष खंडे ही गला मात्र को केबे पैसा दे पारबार नहीं कि गाँ लोगों को मध्य किसी न बुझी न सुझी से माने तांको कामटा से माने चले चंती गाँ पूर्व रही आसिक गछ फुट काठ पत्र सुविधा पानी पवन सब सुविधा
There is a lot of people without land will be displaced and they will get no compensation, no money compensation, nothing. And this is a usual trend in this country. If you don't have a piece of land, you get nothing.
To get something, you have to give up something. Most of the displacement of people, wherever it takes place, the government of India as well as the state government has come up with a scheme where one member of each displaced family is given employment in whatever activity of industrialization or mining activity or whatever takes place.
When the Gonga Dam was built, the local people were forced to leave their homes. Years later, and they say they are still trying to get recognition for their land rights.
They are the hill tribes. They are the Baga tribes, hill tribes. Initially, they lived in the forest, in the jungles and in the hills. They lose their land in the dam side, and finally they come here with the efforts of Ekta Parishad, and now they are settled in here in Ghameri village. The status of village is illegal. So the High Court and the Forest Department is try to establish this concept that this village is illegal village. Sometimes the Forest Department and the Police Department and the forest officials, they are really very violent against these people. I mean, if you heard the story of this Ghameri village, their huts are destroyed so many times.
Also in the same state, the tribal people we spoke to said the forestry department wants the land they cultivate for plantations.
दिन जे दिन झाला से प्रिपेयर टू आगी लगान तेने दिन खतना होइस ओला धर के गेन लहासला धर के उनला जिन बनसुरत के समिति रे तेन तेन गाड़ी मोटर में लई गइन त उन खर बोतला लई लईस त जेन हम लहास धर के गे रहन त हमारा पोटला नहीं लईस मार हुआ दबा घुड़काने मारे की बात रही से वहाँ वही भूखली दबात रही से
We are some 1,000 people, 6,000 people got land entitlement here. But we want land entitlement for the whole tribes, not for ours only. So we are still ready to fight. Now we are given ultimatum to Patwari, revenue officials again, a next 2-month ultimatum. Because he is responsible for the 40 villages, not for 1 or 2. Yeah, he's there. So he is the responsible person for 40 villages to issuing the land entitlement. Otherwise, they are all ready to again walk to the Raipur city, to the assembly for meeting with the chief minister.
The state government recently they have announced that they will be looking into the primitive tribes, for example, Korbas and Begas, and they will be given some land for the cultivation. Though it will not be in the forest area, but they will find some alternative so that they will be given some land for the cultivation.
See, the revenue generation also for the state, for any state's growth, for any state's development, you need revenue. We have 98% of the country's chrome ore. We have huge deposits of bauxite, we have huge deposits of coal, we have graphite, we have manganese.
Suddenly the entire development process, whether it is mining, whether it is construction of a dam, whether it is setting up an industry, the entire thing is focused in Adivasi areas, the areas where the indigenous people are living, the tribals are living. As a result, what you now find is large number of Adivasis are displaced and they are going out.
Company still like industry हो रहा है आउरी बोटा जमी के लोके कूड़े कहाँ है कितने बुड़ू लोके कूड़े तो सेटा मैंने 3 गाँव लोग पाई गोले ना छाल ले बाकी लोग तो गरीब दुखी जन पर्जा मैंने आदिवासी लोग तो पट्टा पर्चा भी रिकॉर्ड पत्र भी बनाई नहीं हमें ये जन गरीब दुखी लोग मैंने हमके जमी बाड़ी गला पर जंगल गला पर चली नहीं पारू बोली कर पानी पाई हमें जेल गला बेले जिते बेले आंदोलन कलु आर अरेस्ट हेलु सेतकी बेल के पानी पाई कहला के डीएसपी कहले हमके जे अरेस्ट करे थिले फोर्स धरी करी डीएसपी कहले जे होई रे से पहाड़ रो पानी सिना स्रोत सुकी जीवो आउरी से वर्षा हेला पानी कुआड़े जीवो जे माने क्षतिग्रस्त हेबे से माने एबे वर्तमान पाई 55,000 हेबे प्लांट कंप्लीट हे करी फैक्ट्री कंप्लीट हे गला परे जेते बेले माइनिंग सरी जीवा तार पर 10 लाख हेबे
जे में कोन पाई दी जीबी मु ए घर कोन चाट खाउथि घर को 10 माला घर बन दाम के राजी ने बुटी कुड़ा हम के राजी से मिनिस्टर में ओडिशा मु मध्य ओडिशा जिलापाल में ओडिशा ताम 10 कत कर नियन जिलापाल में ओडिशा मु मध्य ओडिशा ताम 10 कत कर नियन मु देबी नहीं.
We have not received any complaints in the government. If we had received any complaints, we would probably have taken whatever steps that need to have been taken. So I would like to believe that they are happy.
जमी बाड़ी नहीं की किच्छु नहीं हॉल नहीं की तूल नहीं जबरदस्ती तो करबो आरी कांडा नहीं हेले बिल्कुल छड़ भी नहीं जा पासे हेले मोते मुई जीबी सूल पकले मोते मोर जीवन जाओ.
The 2020 blueprint could put India on the path to becoming an economic superpower, but its critics fear traditional Indian values are being trampled on.
There is a lot of money that is coming in from different parts of the world, particularly England, for education in India. This money is supposedly providing education to those who are quote-unquote illiterate. I think that people who live in India's rural areas and its forests, and I'm not romanticizing this, are themselves very educated. Their knowledge systems are extremely sophisticated. What they need is, of course, they need to become functionally literate. Of course, they need to be able to compete with the best in the world. But they should not be educated in ways which alienates them from the very sources of livelihood and meaning that they have at the moment.
Gandhi repeatedly said that education should be work-centered and value-centered. See, the present educational system is basically a system which creates more exploiters. It's not knowingly, but then this is how things are.
हो सकता है पुस्तकें पाठ से पढ़ने के बाद उन लोग बुद्धि में आ जाता होगा कि हम लोग शहर में रहते हैं तो अच्छे काम मिल जाता तो अच्छे कमाते हैं हम भी अच्छे घर बना लेते गाड़ी खरीद लेते.
I don't think that the aid that is coming from the UK is helping our people, because much of the aid goes into promoting formal education in India, which is not helping the people, because formal education is creating a mindset to go out of the villages, to leave the rural areas, go into the urban areas in the hope of getting jobs.
ठीक है, हो सकता है ना, ये सब ध्यान और आकृष्ट जरूर करते सब चीज़, ये भी एक कारण है क्या ये सब मान लो देहात में ये सब सुलभ रहते कोई इच्छा नहीं होती.
Less consumption is not backwardness. See, how do you measure it now? People who don't consume much are backward, and people who consume more are forward. The trend is very clear that we need all the resources of the world in order to protect the interest of a few. The industries are coming in, walking in with suitcase full of money, and they are taking land, they are taking water, they are taking whatever resources are there locally and displacing the Adivasis, and government is keeping their eyes shut.
In India, the world's biggest democracy, 70% of the population still live on the land. But the smallholder farmer is cynical about how well their interests are represented by the politicians.
ନିଜର ଆବଶ୍ୟକତା ଯାହା ଅଛି ପାଣି ଆଲୁଅ ବାସ ଏବଂ ସ୍ୱାସ୍ଥ୍ୟ ଆପଣଙ୍କର ନ୍ୟାଯ୍ୟ ଦାବିକୁ ମୁଁ ମଧ୍ୟ ଆପଣ ଜୟ ଜଗତ ଭैया.
All political parties should be forced to give it in writing, and if they don't do, then you have this piece of paper signed by them, hold them in the street, sit in front of their car, go to the newspaper and show the paper and put them to shame.
है कि नहीं का है पावत ले कैसे कथे दादा भैया मोला दे देवे जिता देवे तोला ऐसे काम कर दूं वो कहीं तोला ये जात बनवा दूं कोई मिलते का है ना. तो देखो जो मर जाते मृत्यु खो जाते हैं उसी को निराश्रित सरकार दे रहा है. वो कहाँ कर रहा भाई, जब सेवा नहीं करेगा तब तक हम या बिल्कुल आंदोलन करेंगे, उसको जरूरी है.
The official policies of consolidating landholding to increase efficiency are bitterly opposed, leading to violent protests in some parts. But Ekta Parishad is committed to peaceful, direct action and says it's getting results.
I have a larger plan, taking out a march of 50,000 people to Delhi. Walking 300 kilometers will take at least 10 to 15 days. And no government can really stand that. You know, getting the national highway blocked for 15 days is something unthinkable for any government. As a result, the government will have to either use repression or use the technique of negotiation. I am ready for both.